Hey guys, tonight we begin with a story of mud, firelight, and the muffled bleats of sheep in the distance. You're lying on a bed of straw that rustles beneath your back. There's smoke in the air, not from danger, but from the cooking hearth that never quite vents properly. Outside, chickens peck at frozen dirt. Inside, your mother is groaning. A midwife is muttering Latin mixed with village slang, and someone's trying to boil nettles. This is your very first night in the world, a medieval world. And frankly, you probably won't survive this decade. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it in your corner of the world? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born in a cottage that has no chimney, no door latch, and barely enough straw to pad the cold-packed earth floor. It smells faintly of onions and very strongly of people. The year is somewhere in the late 1200s, no one's exactly sure. Your family doesn't keep a written calendar or even a wooden tally stick. Time is measured in sowing seasons, bad storms, and how many teeth your uncle still has. You enter the world not with a cry but a squelch, wrapped in linens boiled in elderflower water, and immediately handed off to the local midwife, a brisk woman with hands like tree roots and a philosophy that babies should be smacked into their proper place early. She squints at you under candlelight and says, "Well, looks like a loud one." Your mother, who is not quite conscious but has survived her fifth birth, groans weakly. Someone hands her a hot drink made from weak ale, parsley, and some leftover barley grains. No one expects her to name you right away. Naming can wait until the priest shows up. If he shows up, he's late because his mule broke a shoe or because he's drunk again, depending on who you ask. You are one of several siblings. 2 of them made it past the age of 3, which is impressive for this village. A 3rd sibling, born the previous year, was too small and never cried, and now rests under a nameless patch of earth behind the cowshed. Your family has stopped getting overly attached until the child starts walking and throwing things. The cottage where you're born has 1 room. It is shared by your parents, your surviving siblings, a grandmother who never opens both eyes at the same time, and at least 2 hens who simply refuse to be banished from the house. In one smoky corner, a weaving frame leans against the wall like it's given up on life. In another, a stack of drying turnips looms ominously. Outside, it's late autumn. The ground is wet, the sky never truly lightens, and someone's ox has wandered too close to your fence again. But inside, there's warmth of a sort, thanks mostly to body heat and the small fire crackling in a hearth made from river stones and wishful thinking. The village midwife checks your breathing again by holding you upside down, gently smacking your feet, and offering you a sniff of burnt rosemary. This is considered cutting-edge medicine. When you start to wail, she grunts approvingly, swaddles you tightly, and mutters a brief prayer to Saint Zita, patron of domestic servants and babies born near pigs. Your father isn't present for the birth. He's out dealing with a sheep that fell into a ditch. When he returns, smelling of damp wool and resignation, he peers down at you and says something encouraging like, "Looks like it might survive." Then he takes off his boots and plops onto a stool that creaks dangerously beneath him. Over the next few days, you sleep, you cry, and you're occasionally held near the fire like a human turnip roasting on a slow spit. Grandmother insists on spitting into the corners of the room to ward off evil spirits. The neighbors drop by to peer in and offer slightly unhelpful advice, like, "You should hang a badger skull above the cradle," and "My cousin's baby never cried and lived to 40. Your cradle is a repurposed grain box lined with scraps of old wool. It rocks slightly when kicked, mostly by the passing hens. You're never alone. Someone is always within arm's reach, an older sibling, a snoozing dog, or a rat investigating your swaddling for snack potential. Baptism finally arrives 2 weeks later, after the priest is located napping under an upturned barrow cart. You are blessed with holy water that smells faintly of cider, given a saint's name no one can pronounce, and introduced to the congregation with a splash and a slightly crooked sign of the cross. One neighbor whispers that your eyebrows look suspiciously like your cousin's. The priest doesn't linger. He pockets a few eggs as his fee and mutters something about needing a miracle just to get back down that road in these boots. Your first winter is hard. The roof leaks. The goats try to sleep inside. Your breath is always visible, even indoors. But you cling on. You are wrapped in every available scrap of warmth, rags, furs, even an old priest's robe someone found after last year's harvest feast. You're not yet aware of it, but you've beaten the odds. Most babies here don't survive long enough to be annoying. You, on the other hand, are already developing a strong pair of lungs and an instinctive mistrust of geese. So you survive, you grow, you enter the strange, smoky, scratchy rhythm of medieval peasant life, where every day is a muddle of labor, laughter, and livestock that have too many opinions. And quite honestly, it only gets stranger from here. You're not a baby anymore, though no one's exactly sure when you stopped being one. There's no birthday cake, no candles, no declarations. One day you're swaddled and snoozing. The next you're sitting on a rickety stool, gnawing a wooden spoon like it owes you money, while the dog eyes you suspiciously. Welcome to your early childhood, days ruled by smoke, soup, and stubby fingers poking things they probably shouldn't. Your first memories come in smells: boiled cabbage, wet wool, dung. Mostly dung. The family goat is a particularly pungent contributor. You toddle through the cottage on unsteady legs, trailing behind your older siblings, who are experts at ignoring you unless you've wandered into something dangerous, like the fire, or the pickled onions, or the neighbor's emotional rooster. You're fed from a communal pot, into which everything goes: turnips, leeks, scraps of salted fish, a suspicious handful of dried berries, and whatever root was accidentally dug up while chasing a mole. This stew is referred to affectionately as pottage, which sounds fancy until you see it congeal in the corner of your bowl. Still, you're hungry, always hungry, and you eat what's warm, even if it's mushy and possibly still moving. When it's not raining rare, you're allowed outside. The world out there is enormous, endless mud, cackling birds, towering geese, and other children, running barefoot through puddles. You join them cautiously, marveling at the way the older boys hurl clumps of dirt at one another like it's a formal sport. It probably is. Everything here seems half game, half survival. The chickens don't like you. You don't like the chickens. Mutual hostility is declared after one pecks your toe and you retaliate with a handful of straw. The feud escalates over the coming months, culminating in the infamous co-op incident, which your mother still scolds you for when she's in a storytelling mood. Sleep happens in snatches. You doze when the fire's low and people aren't stomping past. Some nights the family sings, or rather chants, soft, droning work songs that seem to be as much for the adults' comfort as the children's. Your bed is a shared pile of cloth, siblings, and one small pig that refuses to sleep anywhere else. Once, a traveling friar comes through and tells a parable about a boy who was too noisy and got turned into a frog. You spend 3 days trying not to make any sound, which alarms your mother and confuses the dog. Eventually you sneeze, burst into tears, and are rewarded with a bit of honey on bread. Lesson learned: frogs or not, silence gets you snacks. Toilet matters are rustic. You're taught to squat behind the compost pile and avoid looking too closely at anything moving. There's a rhyme the older kids chant: go where the nettles grow, but mind the sting and mind your toe. You don't understand it until much later, and by then the toe has already suffered. One day, the Reeves wife, a stern woman with 7 teeth and 17 opinions, says you're old enough for small hands work. This includes sorting peas, shooing birds from grain sacks, and stirring pottage without falling in. You fail at least 2 of those tasks immediately. But no one is surprised. Childhood here is a clumsy apprenticeship for a hard life. Everyone expects mistakes. The key is surviving them. Bathing is optional and usually involves being dunked in a tub with siblings and soapy water made from ashes and leftover lard. You come out cleaner but smell faintly like a ham. Your hair is never truly untangled, and lice are a fact of life, like bad weather or gossip. Still, there are pleasures. When the sun hits just right, you nap in warm hay. Sometimes a neighbor lets you ride on the back of his docile ox for exactly 4 seconds before you slide off. And once, you find a shiny beetle and decide it's your best friend for an entire week, until it disappears under a boot. Stories are your greatest joy. Every evening, after the chores and the grumbling and the endless warnings not to touch the fire, your grandmother tells tales of knights who never bathed but still got married, of saints who talked to animals, and of a man who once sneezed so hard he cured his hiccups and ruined a wedding. You begin to repeat her stories to the chickens. They remain unimpressed. Language comes in bursts. You learn words for food, danger, animal, and the ever-popular mine. You also learn when not to talk, especially when the adults are discussing tithes, weather omens, or who's been stealing the good turnips again. As you grow stronger, you help more. You carry firewood in your arms and mud on your boots. You watch, wide-eyed, as the older boys climb the fruit trees and get stung by bees. You stay firmly on the ground. One day, a rooster chases you around the yard in front of the entire village. You cry. Your sister laughs. The rooster becomes legend. A month later, it's dinner. You cry again, but for slightly different reasons. And so your early years pass, not in golden innocence or idle freedom, but in 1,000 small scrapes, scoldings, and triumphs. You make a small place for yourself in this chaotic world of pottage and peas, feathers, and firewood. You survive your first goose attack. You learn that turnips are not toys. And you learn, slowly, that life, even for a peasant child, has its moments of wonder, as long as you don't step in them barefoot. You've figured out how your legs work now, though your knees are perpetually smudged and your toes seem magnetically drawn to hard objects. You wobble less and sprint more, usually after chickens, sometimes after siblings, and occasionally away from things you shouldn't have touched. Welcome to your toddling years, that dreamy age when your curiosity outruns your common sense, and no one is safe from your grubby hands. Mornings start early, because the sun comes in through a hole in the wall and lands squarely on your face. There are no curtains, clocks, or weekends, just the rooster crowing with all the smugness of a creature that doesn't fear stew pots. You roll out of your shared sleeping pile, kick your brother in the shin by accident, he kicks back on purpose, and fumble around for the slightly less crusty tunic that counts as clean. The chickens are already clucking about the yard, resuming their life's mission to escape, attack, or confuse. You've learned to steer clear of one hen in particular, Maud, a beast with eyes like burnt coals and a peck that could chip pottery. You once tried to pet her. You still have the scar and perhaps the grudge. Your role in the family is expanding. You're not hauling firewood yet, but you're trusted with smaller tasks, bringing the spoon, watching the pot, and sitting beside the open door to keep an eye on the toddler while the adults tend to the morning work. The toddler, in turn, eats your bread crust and pokes your ear for entertainment. You sigh dramatically and endure it. You're growing up. Outside, the village is waking up. Smoke threads into the air from crooked chimneys. The smith is already hammering, the sound ringing out like a cough that won't quit. A neighbor yells about a missing goat. Somewhere, a dog is barking at nothing. It's all deeply familiar and very muddy. You wander the yard, a stick in your hand and no particular destination. You whack rocks, leaves, and once, very nearly your own foot, you talk to the stick. It's a sword, then a wand, then a very persuasive worm. You're imaginative like that. Some days, the older children herd you down to the stream to help with laundry. You don't help. You mostly splash and marvel at how cold the water is. Your sister gives you a thump on the head when you try to wash a turnip. Still, she lets you wring a cloth or two and tells you that if you keep practicing, you'll get strong arms like father. You glance at your own twiggy limbs and flex dramatically. She rolls her eyes. Lunch is whatever's left from breakfast, warmed over with new water and slightly less enthusiasm. You're a big fan of anything soft and salty. You've developed an irrational hatred of stewed leeks. No one cares. You eat them anyway. You always do, eventually. At this age, you learn mostly by watching. You watch your father dig furrows in the field, your mother knead dough with fists like dough presses, and your uncle swear creatively while trying to fix the cartwheel again. You absorb everything: phrases, gestures, tricks, like how to find the warmest spot by the fire, or how to distract the dog long enough to sneak an extra bite. You're also learning what not to do. Don't touch the red berries. Don't chase bees with bare hands. Don't say cheese priest when the real priest is nearby. That last one caused an incident. One memorable day, a nearby cottage catches fire when someone tries to dry damp rushes too close to the hearth. Everyone runs to help, forming a bucket chain that is more like a leaky suggestion. You are too small to carry water, but not too small to be stepped on. So you're deposited in a barrel and told to stay. You do. You also discover that sitting in a barrel is surprisingly cozy, and that you can see stars if you look straight up for long enough. Your clothes are hand-me-downs or hand-me-downs of hand-me-downs. You have one woolen tunic with a patched shoulder, and one longer shirt that used to be your cousin's before he outgrew it and started aspiring to shoes. You've heard rumors of shoes. You do not currently possess them. You toddle after your mother during chores, mostly getting in the way. She tolerates it. She even teaches you how to pluck weeds, though you mostly pluck unripe onions and then cry when she makes you put them back. She doesn't yell. She just sighs and mutters something about learning the hard way. Evenings are your favorite. After supper, the grown-ups sit by the fire. If it's cold, they wrap feet in woven straw or share the dog. You curl up by your grandmother, who smells like sage and onion and moths. She tells stories of saints, dragons, and the time your grandfather got chased up a tree by a cow. You giggle. She pinches your cheek. Life is good. One night, your father hoists you onto his shoulders just before bed. From up there, the world is astonishing. You see the tops of people's heads. You see the smoke curling like ribbon into the twilight. You see the moon, and for a moment, you believe you could touch it. You reach out with sticky fingers and try. Then he sneezes, you nearly fall, and everyone laughs. You laugh too, even though you have no idea what was funny. It just feels good to be tall, for once. And so, day by day, toe by stub toe, you pass through the magical, muddy age of toddling where everything is new and dangerous and full of potential. You learn to laugh, to listen, and to steer clear of Maud the chicken. That's growth. There's a certain age, usually around 5, when the world abruptly stops being about chasing chickens and starts being about chores. Small hands are useful now. Your toddling has matured into actual walking. You can hold a bucket without dropping it. You've stopped trying to eat every bug you see. Congratulations, you're officially useful. The day it happens isn't ceremonial. No bells ring. No village elder claps you on the back. It's just your mother thrusting a wooden ladle into your hand before dawn and saying, "You're stirring the pottage today. Don't let it scorch." And just like that, you're inducted into the lifelong ritual of doing things before you're ready. Chores begin small. You're told to gather kindling little sticks for the fire. You take this very seriously, presenting your haul like treasure. Half of it is damp moss and one confused toad, but you tried. That counts. Soon you're sweeping the floor with a broom that's taller than you, and made from tied-together twigs. You're terrible at it. You mostly just spread dirt from one corner to another, but your grandmother gives a nod of approval anyway. A cleanish cottage is still a cottage, she says wisely. No one knows what that means. The next task is a bit more prestigious, scaring crows. Fields are being sown and birds think it's a buffet, so your job is to wave your arms, shout nonsense, and generally make yourself a nuisance among the barley shoots. It's the first time anyone's given you space and told you to yell. You adore it. You fashion yourself a crown from reeds, a cape from burlap, and declare yourself Barley King. You charge at the crows with righteous fury and a stick shaped like a sword. The crows are unimpressed. One poops on you. Still, you hold the line. Not all chores are so dramatic. Fetching water is a daily burden. The village well is a social hub, but you're not there to gossip. You're there to lug a sloshing bucket back without spilling half of it. You fail regularly. Once you trip over a duck. Once your brother accidentally bumps you. Once you just forget you were holding it and walk home with nothing but a handle. Still, each time you do it right, there's a nod, a grunt, a pat. Praise is rare here, so even a muttered not bad, is a glittering trophy. One day, the village reeve, a man with a forehead like a roof tile, inspects your house. He counts chickens, notes the new fence post, and then, unbelievably, he points at you and says, "That one's big enough to help with flax combing." You freeze, clutching your crust of bread like it's a shield. Flax combing sounds terrifying. It is. You're handed a bundle of dried stalks and a tool that looks like a hedgehog mated with a rake. Your job, drag the flax through again and again to soften and separate the fibers. You nick your thumb, you cry, you're told to suck it up. You do, eventually. Not all tasks are painful. You're sometimes allowed to help cook, stirring stews, rinsing roots, and being trusted to hold the spoon and not eat from it. This is progress. You sneak a turnip slice once. Your mother smacks your hand and winks. You also tend the fire, which is both a privilege and a panic-inducing responsibility. A cold hearth is a crisis, so you learn how to poke it, feed it twigs, and blow gently until the coals glow red like dragon eyes. You pretend it really is a dragon. You name it Reginald. Reginald keeps the cottage warm. You like Reginald. Other mornings you collect eggs. This seems easy until you reach under a hen who isn't done laying and suddenly discover what claws are for. The hens have opinions, strong ones. You start wearing a leather mitten on your collecting hand. The dog finds this hilarious. You've also been given one of the sacred duties of childhood, holding the spindle basket for your mother while she spins. This means sitting still for nearly an hour while she turns fluff into thread. You fight valiantly against fidgeting. You fail. Once you fall asleep. Once you drop the basket and the fluff rolls directly into the fire. Reginald is unkind. You are sent outside for reflection. Despite the mistakes, your parents begin to count on you. They use your name more when assigning jobs. They say things like, "Go get your sister," or "We'll need you in the field come spring." You feel important, tired but important. One evening, your father brings you along to help mend a broken fence. It's cold, and your hands hurt, and you barely understand what he's doing. But when you hold a post steady and he doesn't correct you, you feel 10 feet tall. He even says, "You'll be mending your own fences soon enough." You don't know what that means, but it sounds like prophecy. The days grow longer. The barley sprouts. The crows stay away more often, perhaps out of fear of your stick-swinging theatrics. And one afternoon, as you carry a bucket all the way back without spilling a drop, your mother tousles your hair and mutters, "Well, you're worth your bread now." You grin. Because you know, at 5 years old, barely taller than a milking stool, you've officially joined the workforce. You're 6 now, maybe 7. No one is entirely sure. Birthdays aren't recorded, and the village priest's memory isn't exactly reliable. He still insists your cousin Gerwin was born during a comet that no one else remembers seeing. But your limbs are longer, your chores have grown, and your baby fat is retreating to make room for sharper elbows and stronger knees. This is the year the pox comes. It begins in another village. Whispers reach your ears through murmured conversations, your mother hissing through her teeth, your father furrowing his brow. Spots, they say. Bad ones, fever too, you don't understand much, only that when adults whisper, something unpleasant is creeping toward you. At first, nothing changes. You still rise at dawn to feed the hens, stir the ashes, and fetch water. You still chase geese, fail at tying knots, and fall asleep before the stars are done arriving. But slowly, the changes begin. The well is visited less. Market trips are canceled. The traveling peddler, who always smells of wine and sells questionable combs, stops coming. One morning, the priest announces a fast to keep away the blight. You're not entirely sure how refusing cabbage helps, but the grown-ups look solemn, so you comply. You hide your cabbage under the dog. The dog is grateful. You are forgiven. A few days later, someone you know coughs. A hard, bark-like sound. Then you hear someone else has gone to bed and not gotten up. You see a cart roll through the village with a lumpy form under a cloth. Adults avert their eyes. The children know better than to ask. Your family prepares. Herbs are hung above the doors. Rosemary, garlic, and something that smells like an anxious goat. Your grandmother boils a brew so foul the steam alone sends flies packing. You are made to drink it. Twice. You cry. Your brother pretends not to gag. The midwife claims it wards off fever. It mostly wards off appetite. Then it happens. One morning, your sister doesn't get up. At first, you think she's lazy. You try to poke her awake. She groans. Her forehead is warm, too warm. Spots appear that afternoon, red, angry, and fast-spreading. You're told not to touch her, which you promptly ignore. She's your sister. You spend the night beside her anyway, humming a nonsense song and holding her clammy hand. The fever lasts days. Time becomes strange, measured in how much soup she drinks or how many times she calls out for your mother. You help however you can, cooling her with wet cloths, whispering silly stories, feeding the fire. Reginald the hearth dragon becomes a hero in your tales, bravely protecting her from invisible beasts. And then, just like that, she recovers. Weak, yes, but sitting up and hungry. Your father mutters a prayer of thanks. Your mother weeps behind a curtain. You feel proud, like you somehow helped banish the fever with sheer stubbornness. But not everyone is as lucky. In the days that follow, the pox takes 3 villagers. One is the thatcher's youngest, a boy who once helped you out of a ditch. Another is a quiet old man with a beard that birds like to nest in. The third is your cousin Elric, who once dared you to eat a worm. You did. It was chewy. He's buried near the hedge with only a cross of sticks to mark the spot. The village is quiet. Even the dogs are subdued. You feel something in the air, grief, fear, a weight pressing down. The grown-ups start muttering about cleansing, and one morning everyone gathers for a special procession. The priest leads the way with incense that smells like burnt cabbage. You walk behind, holding a candle, your wax dripping into the dirt. That night the wind changes, rain falls, the fever lifts, the village survives, barely. In the aftermath, life resumes. People begin smiling again, though cautiously, like laughter might bring the plague back. Your mother bakes bread that doesn't taste like medicine. Your father mends the fence without muttering doom. You see a squirrel in the tree again. It feels like a sign. And through it all, you grow. You've lost 2 teeth. One came out while biting into a radish, the other during a pillow fight-turned brawl. You store them in a pouch made from your uncle's old boot heel. You show them off to the chickens, who remain unmoved. Your chores continue. You've graduated to helping with the livestock. Sheep are strange, bumpy creatures who neither like nor hate you. They simply exist. You feed them. They blink. Once you try to ride one. Once. You learn more about plants. Which ones make soup, which ones sting, and which ones make your cousin hiccup for 2 hours. Your grandmother gives you a lesson on field medicine, which involves rubbing garlic on wounds and spitting 3 times toward the sunrise. You suspect she's making some of it up, but you nod solemnly anyway. This is also the year you learn how to be quiet. Not silent exactly, but watchful. You begin to notice things. How your father's eyes crinkle when he's proud. How your mother taps her fingers when worried. How the wind sounds different before a storm. You don't always understand, but you're starting to sense the rhythms beneath the noise. You begin to dream more vividly, of flying, of walking through sunlit fields, of a world without chores. You tell no one. Dreams are private currency, traded only between children or saved for whispering into the fire when everyone else is asleep. One evening, your sister, recovered, stronger, sassier, offers you a piece of roasted parsnip. You thank her with your mouth full. She ruffles your hair. It's a small moment, but it stays with you. Because this was the year of the fever, the year the pox came and didn't take everyone, the year you stirred the pot, fed the sheep, and sat beside your sister as her skin burned and her eyes glazed and her breath rasped, and you stayed. You are no longer just a child. You are a survivor. Spring arrives like a drunk guest, loud, wet, and smelling faintly of onions. The frost retreats reluctantly, leaving behind slush, rot, and the peculiar joy of walking barefoot on not quite frozen mud. You're older now, perhaps 8, though again no one's counting. You're stronger, faster, and you can carry a full bucket without spilling more than half. Your family's impressed. The dog is less so. With spring comes sowing season. This means long days, aching backs, and an entire symphony of sneezes as pollen swirls like judgment through the village air. The men take the plows out, the women plant and chant. You, too small to do either, are assigned an age-old peasant right, the field songs. You're not just singing, of course. You're also watching, listening, waiting. The work in the fields is carefully timed with tradition, and your role is part superstition, part morale boost, and part childcare. Older kids like you are sent ahead to prepare the earth, which in reality means stomping on molehills and waving ribbons tied to sticks. The grown-ups follow behind, turning soil with wooden plows dragged by oxen whose expressions scream silent suffering. You trail beside them, chanting softly, mimicking your mother's call and response. Earth below, seed we throw? Make it grow, make it grow. There's a beat to it, a rhythm that fits the footfalls, the lift and drop of hose, the creak of wood. You don't understand half the words, they're ancient, passed down and half forgotten, but the melody is as sticky as wet thatch. By day 3, it's in your bones. You love it. Not because it's easy. It's not. You're sunburned, scratched, and your hands sting from pulling thorny weeds you thought were blessed herbs. But there's something magical about standing in a wide field, the wind tugging at your tunic, your voice echoing across rows of soil while birds hop suspiciously behind you. You feel useful. You feel oddly powerful. Not everyone shares your enthusiasm. Your cousin Edric claims singing to seeds is nonsense and spends his time trying to catch field mice with a spoon. Your sister says your voice sounds like a duck complaining. She's not wrong. But your grandmother just nods sagely and says, if the song fits the soil, let it be sung. You nod back, pretending to understand. At home, planting season takes over every conversation. Meals are late, tools are everywhere, and you sleep like a rock every night curled beside the hearth, fingers twitching as if still weeding in dreams. Even Reginald the hearth dragon seems exhausted, curling into a tiny ember with barely a flicker. On the 5th morning, the weather turns. Clouds gather. A thunderstorm threatens. You're rushed out with the rest of the children to scatter ash around the garden beds. Part fertilizer, part superstition. The ashes remind the earth we're watching, your mother says cryptically. You wonder if the earth ever watches back. During the rainstorm, you huddle under a leaky awning with your siblings, watching droplets carve tiny rivers through the mud. You sing a quiet version of the field song, your voice just a murmur now. Your sister doesn't tease you this time. She joins in. One night, after the sowing is done, the village holds a small festival, not one of the big saints' days, just a communal moment to celebrate that the seeds are in, the animals haven't escaped much, and no one fell asleep in the barley again. There's dancing. You join in, sort of. You hop in time with a drum made from goat hide and stretched string. You are terrible. No one cares. Your father claps along. Your mother hums. Your grandmother nods to the beat like it's a sacred ritual. It might be. Everything feels sacred when food is scarce and weather is moody. Afterward, people sit on logs and stones, drinking weak ale and trading stories. A very old man tells you the earth listens to kind voices. A woman from the next hamlet insists that singing during sowing brings sweeter carrots. You decide to test this theory personally. You sneak out the next morning and sing a dramatic solo to your family's vegetable patch. You include verses about bravery, worms, and the nobility of turnips. The chickens watch silently. One pecks your ankle. The song ends. Despite this, the work continues. You help spread mulch, basically smelly straw. You water seedlings. You shoo snails with a stick you've named Sir Crunch. You are officially part of the agricultural machine, small but vital, loud but tolerated. And when the sprouts finally poke their way through the soil, tiny green flags fluttering in the breeze, you feel something in your chest shift. Not pride exactly. More like awe. You helped make this. Your chants, your hands, your nonsense songs, somehow, they mattered. It's one of the first times in your short, muddy life that the world feels like it responds to you. Later that week, the priest comes to bless the fields. He's sober, surprisingly, swings his incense like he means it. You stand near the back watching the smoke curl skyward. You whisper your own little blessing, "Grow well, little barley. I sang my lungs out for you." That night, your mother serves a stew thicker than usual. She smiles a little more. Your father doesn't even yell when the dog steals a loaf of bread. And you? You sleep deeply, your limbs sore, your feet filthy, your heart light. Because in a world of toil and repetition, you've found your rhythm, your chant, your purpose. You're a child of the fields now, louder than the crows, stronger than the weeds, and just strange enough to make the carrots listen. It's a year of crooked teeth and crooked sermons. Your mouth is a battlefield, molars making their slow, aching debut, while baby teeth flee the scene in dramatic fashion. One falls out mid-turnip bite and lands in the dog's bowl. Another you wiggle loose just for fun, showing it proudly to your sister, who immediately screams and tells everyone you're turning into a ghoul. You're pretty sure that's a compliment. You tuck each lost tooth into a pouch on your belt, which also contains a feather, 2 pebbles, a broken spoon handle, and a tiny cloth doll with one arm. This is your personal treasury. You take it very seriously. Then, one cloudy market day, a monk arrives. You've seen monks before, usually dusty, often sleepy, always carrying books they refuse to let children touch. But this one is different. He's tall, silent, and has a wild look in his eyes, like he's just argued with a bear and won. His robe is patched, his sandals are homemade, and he carries a satchel that jingles ominously. He appears at the church one morning and starts preaching in a voice like thunder wrapped in honey. You and the other children crowd around the open windows, listening wide-eyed. He speaks of hellfire, of temptation, of eyes watching from the clouds. He says something about goats and sin in the same sentence. You squirm. The adults nod solemnly. The priest frowns deeply. the chickens flee entirely. The monk stays for several days. During that time, your life becomes a strange mix of spiritual dread and casual dentistry. Your mother begins burning more herbs in the corners. To keep away whispers, she mutters. You aren't sure if she means gossip or demons. You hope both. Your grandmother starts sleeping with a sprig of yarrow under her pillow. Your uncle, unusually pious, confesses to stealing a pie 3 years ago, and then asks if stealing a second one counts as the same sin. You, meanwhile, are just trying to survive the agony of molar eruption. One tooth comes in sideways. You spend a week chewing only with the left side of your mouth, giving your speech a strange lisp. The village healer prescribes a poultice that smells like feet. You try it. You regret it. Despite all this, you still go about your chores. You're now on dung duty, collecting, drying, and arranging it for fuel. You try to convince yourself it's a noble task. You give your wheelbarrow a name, Sir Shovelsworth. It does not help. One evening, the monk invites children to gather near the hearth for a moral tale. You attend out of obligation and morbid curiosity. He tells the story of a boy who lied to his mother, then got swallowed by a wolf that turned out to be the devil. You raise your hand to ask why the wolf was disguised as a traveling peddler, but the monk glares and mutters something about impertinent spirits. Later that night you whisper to your sister, "What if the monk's a demon in disguise?" She gasps. You both hide your treasures under your beds and sleep with one eye open, just in case. Eventually, the monk leaves, muttering about pilgrimage and unclean thoughts in the barley field. The village breathes a little easier. The priest resumes his usual half-hearted sermons, and you go back to focusing on more practical matters, like your mouth. One day, your grandmother pulls you aside, holds up a knife, and says, "Let's fix that loose one." You run. She follows, barefoot, laughing like a pirate. You escape, barely, and vow to never mention your teeth around her again. Instead, you seek comfort in simpler things: the warmth of the hearth, the crackle of Reginald, the soft purring of the family cat who sleeps with one eye open and might be older than your grandfather. You carve faces into your potatoes before cooking them. You braid grass into bracelets. You sing off-key while sorting beans. And slowly, the pain fades, the molars settle, your jaw stops aching. You can chew like a normal person again. Victory. As for the monk, he becomes a half-legend. Some say he was a saint. Others say he was cursed. Your cousin insists he saw the man's eyes glow at night. You're not sure. All you know is, the sermons were terrifying, the poultice was worse, and you're very glad he took his jingling satchel elsewhere. Spring turns to early summer. Your teeth are your own again. You smile more now, showing off the gaps and the lopsided grin of someone who's survived both spiritual fire and actual toothache. You're still a child, but there's a little more grit in you now, a little more knowledge of fear, of strange men with loud voices, of the deep relief that comes when pain subsides and the stew tastes like home again. You take your pouch of treasures, tuck it under your tunic, and head out to scare crows, your new molars gleaming in the sun like the trophies they are. It's a warm morning, and something is different. For once there's meat simmering in the pot, not salted herring, not dried squirrel, actual, real, chewy, questionably sourced meat. Your mother hums as she stirs. Your father has shaved, which happens once per festival, and someone's draping flowers over the oxen, who look utterly unimpressed. You scramble out of the cottage in a tunic that's only slightly damp from last night's wash and already stained at the hem. But today, no one cares, because today is festival day, the grandest event the village manages each year that doesn't involve rain, repairs, or regret. It's not a religious holiday, at least not exactly. It loosely coincides with a saint's feast, a good harvest, or the midsummer moon, depending on which elder you ask and how much ale they've had. But what really matters is that today, nobody works, or, more precisely, everyone works on purpose, preparing food, decorating animals, playing strange instruments, and pretending the bishop might show up. He won't. You're assigned flower duty. You and your sister pluck wildflowers from the hedgerows and try to braid them into garlands. Yours fall apart almost instantly. Hers look like crowns made by woodland royalty. You grumble and stick a daisy behind your ear. The goat eats it. You decide not to take it personally. The central green is packed with people wearing their good clothes, which means slightly less patched and slightly more itchy. You notice the reeve has actually combed his beard into something vaguely vertical. Children run wild, shrieking and playing tag with sticks, ribbons, and the occasional angry goose. You spot a juggler, clearly not from your village, tossing 3 apples and humming tunelessly. He's missing 2 teeth and wears shoes that don't match. He's perfect. You sit cross-legged and watch, enraptured. At one point he balances an onion on his head. You clap so hard your palms sting. There's music too, a handful of lutes, a whistle, and something percussive made from a barrel and hope. Your uncle joins in with a flute he only plays when he's had cider. It sounds like a duck learning Latin. No one complains. Then comes the feast. You gather on blankets, logs, and whatever flat-ish surface is available. The food is simple but sacred. Soft bread, onion pies, stewed greens with actual flavor, and astonishingly, meat. You're handed a skewer with something brown and sizzling. It might be pork, it might be squirrel, it doesn't matter, it's delicious. You chew reverently. There's also ale, weak enough for children, but still exciting. You get a mug and sip it proudly. You immediately hiccup. Your sister laughs so hard she snorts bread out her nose. You are deeply impressed. Later, games begin. There's stick wrestling, sack races, and a race to see who can chase the reeve's dog without falling in the mud. No one wins. Everyone falls. The dog has the time of its life. One child tries to pole vault over a puddle using a shepherd's staff. He lands in the puddle. Cheers erupt. He bows, soaked and triumphant. Then someone hauls out the maypole, a tall, wobbly tree trunk draped with ribbons and optimism. The children are supposed to dance around it in patterns. You try. You tangle instantly. Someone ties you to the pole on purpose. You pretend it's a tactical decision. Eventually, the ribbons win. As evening creeps in, the air fills with smoke and stories. Fires are lit. Someone roasts chestnuts. Someone else roasts opinions about the price of grain. Your grandmother tells a tale about a man who fell in love with a turnip and married it. You don't ask follow-up questions. You've learned better. You sit beside the fire, full and content, your head resting on your sister's shoulder. She hums a lullaby you haven't heard since the fever year. You hum along, off-key. The stars begin to emerge sharp and steady in the darkening sky. Somewhere, someone is playing a slow tune on a stringed instrument that doesn't quite stay in tune. It's perfect. As the fire crackles and the embers rise, the adults begin to fade out, one by one. Your father snores on a stump. Your mother hums gently while weaving dried flowers into her hair. You lie back on the grass, your belly full, your toes wiggling in the warm dirt. And for one brief moment, amid the laughter, the music, the smell of roasted onions, you feel a kind of peace that doesn't have a name. A quiet, perfect pause in the long, exhausting story of peasant life. Tomorrow the mud will return, the chores, the squabbling hens, the sore feet and shouting reeve. But tonight, there is music, meat, and moonlight. And that's more than enough. Ale smells like comfort. Not that you're allowed to drink much of it, just the dregs if you're lucky, but you're old enough now to help brew it, and that makes you feel powerful, important. Like you're in on one of the village's secret engines, the thing that keeps everyone moving, singing, laughing, and forgetting just how bad their knees feel. And your teacher, the village alewife. Her name is Mags, and she's got arms like flour sacks and a voice like gravel in honey. She lives 2 cottages over, owns a duck that refuses to be eaten, and talks to her brewing jugs like they're misbehaving children. She also knows every scandal in the village. This is not unrelated to her job. You are sent to her for instruction. This usually happens when your mother needs you out of the house or suspects you've been stealing pickled onions again. Mags takes you in with a grunt and immediately sets you to work peeling bark, fetching water, or carrying dried herbs from her rafters. Never trust a man who won't drink his own brew, she tells you on your first day, handing you a bunch of nettles. Also, never marry a man whose shoes never get dirty. You write that down in your brain. You nod, you write it down. Ale-making, it turns out, is part cooking, part alchemy, and part gossip-fueled ants. You learn to recognize malt from mush, when to stir clockwise, when to taste, and, most importantly, when to shut up and listen. Mags explains the process. Soak the grain, sprout it a little, dry it, mash it, boil it with herbs, cool it, add yeast. Yeast is alive, she says solemnly. Treat it badly and it'll sulk. The first time she lets you stir the mash, your arm nearly falls off. The pot is enormous and stubborn. You stir anyway, sweat dripping down your back, your fingers sticky with barley and pride. When you finish, Mags hands you a sip from her cup. It's warm, strange, slightly sour. Not bad, she mutters. Could have used more wormwood. You don't know what wormwood is, but you nod like you do. Her brewing hut smells like wood smoke, sweet grain, and secrets. You love it. You feel like an apprentice to a wizard who curses a lot and occasionally throws her shoe at mice. One afternoon, you spill a ladle of boiling mash. You expect shouting. Instead, Mags sighs, mutters something about another offering to the ground spirits, and makes you sweep up the mess while singing the barley blessing twice. Sometimes she shares stories of how she once made a brew so strong it knocked the reeve off his stool, of the time she accidentally used fennel instead of hops, and the entire village danced themselves silly, of the man she almost married, who claimed ale was for the weak. So I made him weak, she says, arching a brow. You learn how to test for spoilage, how to store jugs where mice won't reach, and how to keep the brew cool even in summer. You learn that the foam speaks to you, if you're clever enough to listen. You also learn that if you ever forget to clean the mash trough, you'll regret it for days. And while the adults trade coin for her ale, she trades stories for yours. She asks you questions about what the children are whispering, who's sneaking out after dark, who's carved their name into the side of the granary again. You tell her. You try not to enjoy it too much. You fail. She teaches you how to make small ale too, low alcohol, meant for everyday drinking, even by children. Better than water, sometimes, she says, especially if the wells had a bad frog week. You bottle it. You seal the corks. You feel just for a moment like you've made something that matters, something that brings people together. Once, during evening chores, you hear your father laughing, really laughing. It's rare. You peek in and see him sharing a jug of ale with your uncle, both leaning back, eyes closed, chuckling at a story you can't hear. It's one of Mags's brews. You recognize the bottle. You smile. That one was yours. The months roll on, you get better. Mags lets you measure, lets you mix, lets you scold the yeast when it doesn't bubble fast enough. She gives you a ribbon for your belt striped blue and barley gold. Brewer's assistant, she says. Wear it like you've earned it. You do. On one particular brew day, as the sun slants low and the air smells of steam and earth, Mags looks at you and says, "One day you'll make your own, might even beat mine." You beam. Then she adds, "Or you'll blow the roof off this hut trying. Either way, I want to see it." You laugh, so does she. And in that laughter, in the clink of bottles and the soft hiss of fermenting barrels, you realize something. Life here is hard, muddy, and often loud, but it's also rich, warm, and just a little fizzy around the edges. thanks to Mags and thanks to the ale. You've never gone farther than the mill. The mill is where grown-ups drag sacks of grain and return cursing, sore, and coated in flour. Beyond it, that's mystery country. The forest, forbidden. The river bend, only if you're with someone tall and trusted. The road to Market Town, that's basically legend. But today, miraculously, improbably, you're going to Market Town. Your father's back is better, the weather is fair, and the village has goods to trade. Flax thread, dried herbs, a few jars of Mags's infamous ale, the one labeled strong enough to silence complaints. Someone needs to go. He says, "You're coming with me." You drop your bowl in sheer disbelief. You don't sleep the night before. You try. But your heart gallops like the Reeves dog in a goose chase. Your sister tells you horror stories of pickpockets and plague merchants. You pack a crust of bread, a stub of charcoal, and a carved button you insist is lucky. She lends you a scarf. To look respectable, she says. It smells like onions and hope. Dawn finds you on the road, riding beside your father in a cart that creaks like a tired sigh. The ox pulls you along with all the enthusiasm of a beast who knows there's no turning back until sundown. The world unfolds in strange new shapes, taller trees, deeper ditches, birds you don't recognize, and clouds that seem bigger somehow. You pass other carts, some loaded with cheese, others with pottery or eggs or hay so fragrant it makes you hungry. A man jogs by with a goose under his arm. No explanation, no one asks. Then, over the rise, you see it, Market Town. It's huge. It has buildings with more than one floor. It has walls, actual stone ones. You gawk, slack-jawed, until your father thumps your shoulder and mutters, mouth closed, eyes sharp. The gates are busy. People shuffle in from every direction. Peasants, merchants, monks, children with sticky hands and wild hair. A woman rides a donkey side saddle and scolds it for sneezing. A beggar sings a hymn in a language you've never heard. The market itself is overwhelming. Sounds clash, clanging bells, bleating goats, shouting vendors. Smells collide, roasted meat, dung, soap, wine, tallow, spice. Your nose can't keep up, your eyes dart everywhere. You see a juggler balancing on a barrel, tossing pins and quoting proverbs. He's better than the village one. Fewer teeth, but better timing. You see a puppet show with a tiny knight slaying a cloth dragon, while a crowd of children shriek with delight. You nearly cry from laughter. You see spices in colors you didn't know existed, red like blood, yellow like sunflowers, green like your envy. You see a woman selling combs carved into bird shapes. You point. Your father shakes his head. We're here to sell, not buy. You sulk. He hands you a pair. You forgive him. You stop at the ale stall. Mags's bottles go quickly. A man with 3 chins downs a gulp and declares it brighter than his second marriage. Your father beams. You're sent to watch the cart while he haggles over flax prices. You sit on the wheel and count the number of dogs you can spot. 17. One of them might be a goat. You don't ask. You're briefly approached by a man in a hat shaped like a bowl. He offers you magic beans. You decline politely. Later, you hear he tricked a merchant into trading for them. You wonder if they were even beans. At midday, your father buys you a meat pie. You bite in. It's hot, juicy, and probably contains something that once clucked. You don't care. It's the best thing you've ever eaten. You see people dancing near a fountain. You join, badly. A girl about your age grabs your hand. You trip over your own foot. She laughs, gives you a daisy, and disappears into the crowd. You press the flower into your lucky button pouch and try not to look giddy. On the way back, the cart is lighter. Your feet are sore, your cheeks are sunburned. Your father hums a tune that doesn't quite have a melody. You lean against the side of the cart and watch the trees roll by, their leaves flickering gold in the afternoon sun. You're not the same child who left this morning. You've seen things, smelled things, eaten glorious pie, escaped pickpockets possibly. And most importantly, you now know how big the world is and how loud, strange, and magical it can be. You fall asleep against a sack of grain, the daisy still clutched in your fingers, dreaming of puppets, pigs, and piles of glittering spice. Market day may only happen once or twice a year. But the memory of it, well, that stays forever. You're 9 now, and your face is a battlefield. Spots bloom across your forehead like rebellious mushrooms, your nose is suddenly oily, your ears seem larger, your limbs grow unevenly, like one arm is racing ahead of the other. You trip over your own feet, your sister calls you goose legs. You call her mule face, the usual affection. This is the year you learn what puberty is, though no one uses that word. It's more like a series of escalating surprises. You wake up one morning and your voice cracks halfway through a yawn. Another morning you discover hair in new places. You ask your uncle. He shrugs and says it gets worse, then offers you a beat. But what really defines this year isn't your changing body. It's rumors, whispers, plague talk. Not the small fevers, not the spring coughs. Something worse. Something from the coast or the cities, or somewhere the roads get slippery with fear. People call it the cart disease, or the breath rot, or just it. They never say the word twice. You overhear grown-ups muttering about cities where people drop mid-step, towns sealed shut, priests dying mid-prayer. You pretend not to listen, but you always do. You memorize the tone in your mother's voice when she thinks you're not watching. You count how often your father checks the road beyond the fields. And still, life goes on. You keep gathering firewood, keep tending to the sheep, keep learning which herbs help with boils yarrow, which ones make your cousin hiccup fennel, and which ones are for chasing away nightmares lavender or singing off-key while holding a chicken, your grandmother's idea. You begin noticing people differently. There's a girl from the next cottage. She wears her hair in 3 braids and can climb trees faster than your dog. You're not sure what to say to her, so you mostly fall out of trees in her general direction. She laughs. That's enough. One afternoon, she throws a crabapple at your head and calls you carrot teeth. You pretend to be offended. You secretly carve a crabapple into a tiny face and leave it on her windowsill. She never mentions it, but a week later, you find a flower tucked into your boots. You wear it until it wilts. Meanwhile, the whispers grow louder. A traveler arrives, pale and frantic, claiming his town emptied overnight. The priest says he's delirious. The alewife says he reeks of fear. Your father quietly puts away the extra grain sacks. Your mother starts boiling more water. The village midwife begins carrying a sprig of dried rosemary tied to her belt. You don't understand all of it, but you understand this. Something might be coming, something worse than spots or cracked voices, something you can't name but can feel in your bones. To distract yourself, you build things. Tiny fences for beetles. A stool for your sister, she says it's wonky, you say it's artistic. You start carving again, spoons, buttons, faces. You give them away quietly, leaving them like breadcrumbs through the village. You try your hand at riddles. Your best one. What walks on 4 legs at dawn, 2 at midday, and forgets how to walk by supper? Answer, your grandfather. There's laughter, still, music. The reeve breaks his toe chasing a sheep into a stream. A child gets his head stuck in a pumpkin. The traveling friar returns and tries to sell plague-proof vinegar. Your father buys some. Your mother drinks it. It's definitely just vinegar. One night, you sit with your grandmother by the fire. She's weaving nettle cloth and humming. You ask her quietly what the grown-ups are afraid of. She pauses, then says, "Fear doesn't feed you, child, but it keeps your feet dry." You pretend to understand. You don't. But you go to bed that night and tuck your crabapple carving beside your pillow. You hum one of the planting songs. You dream of a world where no one whispers and no one hides. And when you wake up, the rumors are still there, but so are the sheep. So is breakfast. So is the girl with the braids who throws things when she's nervous. Life doesn't stop, even when fear rides in on the wind. You keep going, you keep growing. Spots and all. The summer sun is hot enough to boil puddles. You're out in the cabbage rows, hoe in hand, sweat dripping into your eyes, trying to dig straight lines. The soil is hard, the rows are long, and your resolve is medium, but you've got a reason to try. She's 2 rows over, humming to herself. The girl with the braids. She's weeding faster than you, more gracefully, and with considerably less dirt on her face. Every time you sneak a glance, she catches you and rolls her eyes. You pretend you were inspecting a worm. She doesn't buy it. This is courtship. At least you think it is. In a village like yours, there's no court ball, no serenades, no poetry under balconies, unless someone's fixing the roof. Love starts with glances across fields, passing each other water jugs, maybe braiding someone's hair when no one's looking. It's clumsy, muddy, and full of misunderstandings, just like everything else here. You start helping in the cabbage patch every chance you get. You volunteer to haul water, to weed, to chase birds, anything that lets you be near her while maintaining the illusion that you're just a particularly generous farmer. One day, she throws a clump of dirt at you. You retaliate. War breaks out. The cabbage patch becomes a battlefield of muddy flanks and leafy shields. You both get scolded, and neither of you care. Later, you leave a turnip on her doorstep. You carved a tiny face into it. She doesn't say anything. But 2 days later, you find a sprig of mint tucked into your tool pouch. The mint smells like everything you can't say aloud. You're not the only one trying to impress someone. Your older brother starts sharpening his tools more loudly. Your cousin has taken to wearing a ridiculous feather in his hat, claiming it's a fashion from York. The girl's brother starts shadowing your path with narrowed eyes and a slightly too large stick. You nod respectfully. He nods back. The stick remains. You ask your grandmother, casually, how she met your grandfather. She says, "He stole my chicken, then tried to sell it back to me." She smiles. "He was terrible at it, but he offered me half the eggs, and I married him." That's romance in these parts. One evening, there's a communal meal in the green. Potatoes, onions, bread, a bit of goat cheese someone swears is still good. She sits beside you. You share your bread. She gives you the crispy edge of her pie crust. You don't speak much, but your elbows touch. Later, you walk her home. Not all the way, just to the lane with the hawthorn tree. You talk about sheep, about the weather, about the Reeves' latest argument with his own hat. You say something stupid. She laughs kindly. When you part ways, you try to say something clever. You end up saying, "Your cabbage rows are very straight." She replies, "Yours are less wobbly now." It's the nicest thing anyone's said to you all week. The next day, you carve a little spoon from wood, smooth, sturdy, not too fancy. You leave it near her firewood stack. She doesn't mention it, but the next morning, she's using it to stir porridge. You feel like a knight. Not everyone notices. Not everyone needs to. Your sister rolls her eyes and says, "If you start writing poems, I'll move into the goat shed." Your mother smiles more often. Your father nods approvingly and mutters something about keeping your hands busy and your mouth shut. Classic wisdom. The cabbage grows, the summer passes, you keep digging, keep carving, keep showing up just a little earlier than necessary. She keeps humming, keeps teasing, keeps plaiting her hair with mint. And one day, as you're hauling water together, she bumps your elbow, hands you a crooked little straw figure, and says, "This one's got better balance than you." It's the beginning of something quiet, something soft and solid, not a whirlwind, but a slow, steady bloom like the cabbages, round and rooted. You don't know what comes next, but you hope it includes more rows, more turnip carvings, and, if the gods are kind, maybe a dance at the next festival where you don't trip over your own feet. For now, it's enough to know she laughed at your spoon joke and didn't throw it back. You don't think of yourself as a criminal. You think of yourself as hungry. The pie was sitting on the sill, golden, steaming, obviously left to cool. It smelled like onions, maybe a hint of sage, and something daring like bacon. Your stomach had been growling all day. You were supposed to be gathering firewood, but the pie had other plans. You waited, you watched, you swooped. And you dropped it. The entire thing slipped from your hands, bounced once on the cobblestones, and flopped like a dying fish into the mud. There was a moment of silence. Even the chickens paused. Then came the shouting. "Thief!" someone screamed, though really, incompetent thief would have been more accurate. You ran, of course, straight into a goose, then a bucket, then the reeve. He grabbed your collar with the bored efficiency of a man who's done this before. "You again," he muttered. "Figures." And so, that evening, you received your first official flogging. It wasn't dramatic. No crowds, no stocks, no shouting judge. Just you, the reeve whose left hand is stronger than you'd hoped, and a patch of barn wall behind the ale shed. You got 3 lashes, symbolic more than scarring. Enough to sting, enough to shame. And then, oddly, he handed you the crust of the ruined pie. "Should have run faster," he said, "or waited until it was cool. Rookie mistake." You ate the crust. It was still warm. When you got home, your mother didn't ask questions. She handed you a rag soaked in cider vinegar and raised one eyebrow. You flinched as she cleaned your back. She didn't scold. She didn't need to. Your sister made you a little crown out of straw and placed it on your head while whispering, "Lord of bad decisions." You kept it on. For weeks afterward, you were the village joke. Kids called you pie hands. Someone carved a tiny pie into the side of the well. You pretended to hate it. Secretly, you felt oddly proud. Because here's the thing about small villages, everyone messes up eventually. You just happen to do it publicly, and with pastry. Your grandmother tells you it's a rite of passage. "I once stole a honeycomb," she says. "Bee stung me so bad I passed out face first in a bucket. Your grandfather thought I'd drowned." You believe her. The punishment fades quickly, but the lesson lingers, not just about stealing, but about shame and forgiveness, and the weird way humiliation becomes legend. You begin walking a little taller, somehow. Not because you're proud of what you did, but because you survived it, with pie crumbs on your face and your dignity bruised but intact. And over time, the teasing softens. You become the pie boy. You lean into it. You draw little pies in the dirt with a stick. You tell the younger kids that the pie was cursed, and you were saving the village. They believe you for a week. Even the reeve changes his tone. He starts greeting you with, "Keeping your fingers to yourself?" You always reply, "Mostly," he smirks. One day, the baker's wife, whose pie you'd attempted to liberate, calls you over. She hands you a slightly burnt pasty and says, "This one's too ugly to sell. Take it before I change my mind." You thank her. She winks. And that's how, oddly, you learn about reputation, how it's built, bent, broken, and rebuilt again. Not with speeches or heroic deeds, but with everyday messes, moments, and the occasional mud-streaked pastry. You still crave pie, but now when you want one, you offer to chop wood for the baker's husband. It's slower, sweatier, but oddly more satisfying, especially when he grunts, "Decent work, pie boy," and hands you a warm bundle wrapped in cloth. You nod. You've earned it. Not with cleverness, not with speed, but with a scar or two, a joke that stuck, and a lesson well flogged into your memory. Next time you think, you'll steal a tart instead. But only if it's really, truly worth it. Weddings in your village don't involve churches with bells or flower-strewn aisles. They involve beer, chanting, and shared beds. You're maybe 11, maybe 12. It's a fuzzy time. Your voice still cracks, your elbows still outpace your shoulders, and your understanding of romance is built on pie-swapping, dirt-throwing, and long, silent walks near the cabbage rows. Still, When your cousin announces he's getting married, the entire village shifts into preparation mode like someone kicked a wasp's nest full of bakers. Weddings here aren't just a union, they're a logistical feat. Cottages are cleaned, chickens relocated, fences patched. Someone even washes their tunic. Your grandmother mutters, "Waste of water," but she scrubs her fingernails anyway. Your cousin's bride is from the next hamlet over. She arrives with a cart, 2 goats, and a mother who sniffs everything suspiciously. There's no veil, just a wreath of field daisies and an expression that says she's already regretting this but is too polite to say so. Preparations span days. You're put to work immediately. Your job? Make the fence look less tragic. This involves weaving wildflowers into the hedge, scrubbing old moss from the gate, and chasing away a pig that refuses to accept it's not invited. You also help prepare the wedding ale under Mags's watchful eye. "Brew it right," she warns, "or this marriage'll last as long as a fish on Sunday." The morning of the wedding, the bride and groom are paraded through the village, led by a boy banging a pot and an old woman throwing grain at their heads. You and the other children follow, chanting vaguely rhyming blessings like, "May your goats be ever fat, may your children not chew that." The ceremony itself is simple. No rings, no vows shouted over violins, just the couple standing under the old oak tree while the priest recites the usual blessings, slightly slurred. They hold hands. The priest ties a ribbon around them. Everyone claps. Someone sneezes. A dog steals a sausage. Then comes the feast. It's the biggest one of the year. Tables groan under trenchers of stew, wheels of cheese, loaves of bread, and an actual roasted pig with apples in its nose, one real, one carved from turnip. There's enough ale to float a barn. People who haven't smiled in months suddenly remember jokes. Your uncle recites a limerick that gets him banned from the next 3 weddings. You sit near the back watching, nibbling your second helping of onion pie and trying not to stare when the girl with the braids sits beside you. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. She hands you a slice of tart and flicks your ear. You flick her back. Love is war. As night falls, the dancing begins. Lutes, fiddles, clapping hands. Feet thud, skirts swirl, laughter rises like steam. You don't dance. You loiter near the fire, trying to look thoughtful and mysterious. It doesn't work. Eventually, she drags you into the circle. You step on her foot. She steps back harder. You grin. The newlyweds are expected to retire early. Their bed, such as it is in the communal cottage, where privacy is defined loosely, and walls are made of hopes and old linens. You wonder what that must feel like, to start a whole new life just because someone tied a ribbon around your wrists. Later, curled up near the hearth, you hear the older cousins whispering about what happens on wedding nights. You pretend not to listen. You pretend not to be confused. Your grandmother tosses a pillow at them and growls, "Leave the child alone." You're grateful. You're also no longer sleepy. In the morning, the bride emerges, hair tangled, expression unreadable. The groom follows, looking dazed and slightly bruised from either joy or furniture-related injuries. People cheer. Bread is broken. Someone gives them a hen. That's tradition. You spend the next week helping the newlyweds move into a corner of the groom's family cottage. There's no new home, no privacy, just a different corner curtained off with a wool blanket and a pot of herbs hung to ward off gossip. But they seem happy, or at least busy. Watching them settle, you start to understand marriage here isn't about kisses and lace. It's about working beside someone who doesn't mind your smells, your jokes, your muddy feet. It's about sharing chores, sharing stew, and occasionally sharing silence when the rain is loud. Later that month, you find yourself planting alongside the girl with the braids. She asks if your cabbage rows are still crooked. You tell her they're improving. She doesn't say anything. She just smiles and hands you her shovel. And in that quiet gesture, in that soft clunk of metal meeting dirt, you feel something shift. Not a wedding, not yet, but maybe someday a ribbon of your own. Children arrive with about as much warning as hail. One day you're weeding cabbage, worrying about turnip rot. The next, there's a red-faced, squirming bundle squawking beside the fire and your mother's muttering prayers under her breath. It's your baby brother, or possibly your nephew. The lines get blurry. Either way, he's yours now, at least some of the time. Raising children in a medieval peasant household is not a specialized task. There are no cribs, no lullabies from books, no child development milestones. There is stew, a wooden spoon, and the hope that nobody rolls into the fire. You learn this fast because suddenly you're on child duty. The baby is not peaceful. He is angry, constantly. He shrieks like a kettle when hungry. He shrieks louder when not hungry. He shrieks for sport. Your mother says he'll be strong. You say he's a goblin. At first, you try reasoning with him. You sing. You bounce. You even let him chew on your lucky crabapple carving. He responds by vomiting into your shoe. You adapt. You learn how to balance a baby on one hip while stirring porridge with the other hand. You develop a sixth sense for when he's about to wake up. You become a connoisseur of lullabies that are mostly muttered insults set to the rhythm of your grandmother's snoring. Your cousin brings over her 2 toddlers. They're walking now barefoot, muddy and full of rage. One of them eats dirt, the other bites. You name them chaos and despair. Their mother thinks it's funny. She's wrong. Children here are raised communally. The concept of yours is flexible. If it crawls into your lap, it's your problem. If it falls into a bucket, you fish it out. If it sticks its finger in the butter, you slap the finger and save the butter. Discipline is gentle but consistent. You learn the sacred phrases, no, not that, out, and stop eating that chicken's food. Occasionally, you throw in, if you don't sleep now, I'm going to feed you to the goats. No one believes you. Still, it helps to say it. Bath time happens when the children begin to smell like compost. They're dunked into a wooden tub one after the other, scrubbed with lard soap, and handed bits of old cloth to chew on. You splash them. They splash back. It turns into a war. Everyone loses. Despite the madness, you start to enjoy it. You learn how to carry 2 squirming toddlers while also balancing a bucket on your head. You discover that babies love the sound of threshing flails. You discover that mud pies are a universal toddler language. You build them little huts from straw. You carve toys from old cartwood, horses, birds, a goat with one leg longer than the others. They love it. The goat becomes a celebrity. One day, the girl with the braids joins you. She takes one toddler by the hand and leads them in a circle while chanting a song about bees. The other children join. You sit back, watch her dance, and wonder what it might be like to raise your own. Then a child throws a rock. The spell is broken. Sickness comes occasionally. Fevers, rashes, bad wind. When the babies get quiet, everyone panics. Your grandmother mixes a brew that smells like garlic and regret. The children cry, you hold them. You hum the barley song. They fall asleep with snot bubbles and sticky fingers. One baby, your aunt's youngest, nearly doesn't make it. A chest rattle, a deep fever. You stay up all night holding her close, whispering nonsense. She survives. Her mother weeps. You pretend not to cry. That's the part no one tells you about raising scrappy children. It's terrifying. The joy, the noise, the chaos, it all balances on the edge of silence. You don't fear the wailing, you fear when it stops. But most days, they bounce back. Most days, they're back to screaming at goats, trying to lick the fire poker, and building forts out of chamber pots. You teach them what you know. How to sing the planting song, how to find snails, how to sneak extra porridge without alerting the dog. They learn fast. They copy your walk. They echo your sighs. One calls you Mudface. You try not to feel proud. And in time, they grow. just a little. Enough to toddle without falling every third step. Enough to fetch kindling without tripping into the hearth. Enough to chase chickens with confidence, but not enough skill. You're not a parent, but you're part of the system. And in a village like this, that means everything. Raising children here isn't about bloodlines. It's about showing up, holding them when they're sick, laughing when they fall in puddles, teaching them not to pet bees, feeding them soup, remembering their birthdays even if you're not sure which day it is. One night a toddler curls into your lap and falls asleep mid-sentence, mumbling about clouds and carrots. You look down. Their little fist clutches your old crabapple carving. You sit by the fire, unmoving, while the hearth crackles and shadows dance. And for the first time you realize this is what it feels like to be grown. Not finished, not perfect, but solid. Enough to carry someone smaller than you through a world that doesn't always care whether they survive. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important job of all. You hear the shouting before you see him. The Lord is coming. It ripples through the village like a dropped jug of mead, startled cries, hurried shuffling, someone falling over a goat. You're elbow deep in the pig pen when the news hits. Your first thought is, why now? Your second, I really should have fixed that fence. The Lord, your landlord, liege, and general nuisance, is an elusive figure. He owns the land you live on. Technically, he owns your house, your field, possibly your goat. In theory, he protects the village. In practice, he shows up twice a year, collects taxes, and reminds everyone he exists by sniffing and saying hum at things. And today, he's visiting. This doesn't happen often. Usually, his reeve or steward comes to do the shouting and measuring. But once in a while, the man himself rolls through, usually flanked by horses, retainers, and an air of expensive boredom. Panic sets in. You're told to look busy, which is not the same as being productive. You sweep the same patch of dirt for 15 minutes. Your sister throws flower petals onto the dung heap. Your cousin starts painting the chicken coop white, possibly with milk. Your grandmother starts muttering Latin phrases she learned from a friar who may or may not have been real. Your father tries to prop up the sagging fence with a single stick and an alarming amount of confidence. You fix your tunic, sort of. It still smells like pigs, but now it's tucked in. Then you hear hooves. The Lord's entourage arrives like a misplaced parade. Shining bridles, horses that definitely haven't stepped in any mud lately, servants with expressions of, I'm just here for the bread. At the center is the man himself, tallish, finely dressed, with a trimmed beard and boots that look untouched by hardship. He does not smile. He dismounts with a groan, dusts off his sleeves which aren't dusty, and looks around like he's forgotten why he came. The villagers gather bowing, nodding, doing that awkward half-curtsy that says, please don't ask questions about our roof. The Lord nods once, slowly, like a man who's very proud of knowing how to nod. He speaks. His voice is smooth, deep, and entirely disinterested. Well, he says, it seems tidy. Your mother beams, the pig snorts, the Lord pretends not to notice. He walks through the village with slow deliberation. He stops at the well. He peers into a cart. He frowns at your fence. Oh no. He points, that post's off-center. Your father nods, aye, my lord, artistic choice. The Lord doesn't laugh. He raises one brow. Your father sweats. You clutch the post like you're prepared to defend it in battle. He moves on. Next, he asks for the grain count. The reeve stammers. The clerk takes notes. You stare at your feet, hoping he doesn't notice the turnips growing in what was supposed to be fallow land. You're technically violating a rotation policy. You're also very proud of those turnips. Then he notices the ale. Mags, of course, has a jug ready. She presents it with a bow so low it could be a trick. He sips. He pauses, For a moment he might even smile. Mags beams like a saint. The Lord says, acceptable. This is the highest praise he's given all day. You help hand out bread to the attendants. One thanks you. Another drops crumbs. You consider pocketing the rest, but your mother's glare keeps your hands honest. Finally, the Lord addresses the crowd. Continue working hard, he intones. His Majesty expects loyalty, piety, and order. You aren't sure which majesty he means. You just nod along. He remounts. The horses snort. The reeve trips over a root. A servant loses his hat to the wind and spends the next 3 minutes chasing it into a bush. Then they're gone. Just like that. The village exhales. You all turn to each other, expressions shifting from reverence to mild irritation. Your father groans, bloody fence. Your sister rolls her eyes. At least he didn't ask to inspect the privy. Your cousin stops painting the chicken coop and begins licking his fingers. It's definitely milk. That evening, the village holds a small feast, not out of joy, but relief. Bread, stewed carrots, a bit of cheese. People laugh nervously. Someone tries to imitate the Lord's voice. Everyone laughs harder. You sit with the girl with the braids, sharing a crust of bread. She leans in and whispers, "You stood like a statue." You reply, "I thought if I didn't move, he wouldn't see the fence." She smirks, "He saw it." You groan. Later, you fall asleep near the fire, dreaming of velvet robes, spotless boots, and lopsided fence posts. And somewhere, deep in your half-dreaming brain, you wonder what it would be like to be a lord, rich, clean, free of chores. You decide you'd miss the mud. It always starts with the sound of footsteps. Not your family's, not your neighbor's, heavier, faster, followed by the clank of iron and the swish of parchment. You peer through the cracks in the shutters. There they are, the taxmen. They come twice a year, usually around planting and harvest like weeds with clipboards. They wear tunics with official badges, carry pouches for coins, and never smile. The villagers pretend they're just doing their job. The villagers also pretend they like cabbage. You sigh, it's tax season again. It's hard to explain to outsiders how taxes work in your world. You don't send off gold coins in envelopes. You pay in goods, eggs, chickens, bundles of grain, sometimes labor. If you don't have those, they'll take equivalent value, which roughly translates to whatever's handy. You help your father count eggs that morning. 17. 3 are cracked. 2 might be lizards. Still, it's something. Your mother hands over a sack of beans. Your sister tries to hide the nicest turnips behind a bucket. The reeve arrives first because of course he does. He's chewing a reed and looking smug. He starts checking off names and asking, loudly, about delinquencies. Your cousin pretends to be asleep inside a barrel. It doesn't work. The tax collector is next. He's new, young, clean-shaven, smells like soap. Everyone hates him instantly. He examines your family's offerings with a frown. This grain's short. Your father mutters, "So's your patience." The taxman doesn't hear, or pretends not to. He scribbles something, mutters about tithes, and accepts a chicken that immediately pecks his wrist. You name the chicken Justice. You're told you must also contribute labor 2 days repairing the road near the manor. You nod. Better that than losing the only remaining goat with working knees. In the days that follow, everyone's just a little grumpier. You work the road alongside your cousin and a man who only speaks in complaints. The sun is hot, the tools are heavy, and someone forgot to pack water. You try to impress the girl with the braids by carrying 2 stones at once. You trip. She doesn't even look up. During break, the older workers swap tax horror stories. One says a collector once tried to tax his shadow. Another swears the king himself once taxed hats. Your grandmother insists she once paid her tithe in frog legs. You decide not to ask follow-up questions. Back in the village, the taxman returns to collect herb dues. Your mother offers bundles of dried sage, yarrow, and something labeled "very medicinal, do not question." The collector sniffs it, sneezes, and accepts. You try hiding your carved spoon stash, just in case. The tacksmen are unpredictable, but they're not interested in spoons yet. You notice something odd. Despite the grumbling, despite the sting, tax season is a strange kind of ritual. People complain, but they gather. They count things. They remember what they have, what they don't. They trade stories, swap recipes. Some even help each other cheat a little. You overhear one neighbor telling another to switch their best goose with a decoy and blame foxes. The plan works. The decoy honks too much. No one notices. One night, you ask your grandmother why taxes exist at all. She snorts, to remind you who's in charge. Isn't God in charge, you ask. She smirks, God don't come for chickens. You think about that for a long time. Eventually, the tax collectors leave, their carts full of miscounted beans, offended poultry, and a slightly used cooking pot you're almost sure wasn't yours. The village exhales. You celebrate with a feast, not out of joy, but relief. Someone makes soup with the leftover onions that were too shriveled to be taxed. Your cousin plays his one-string fiddle. You and your friends do a mock reenactment of the tax day, complete with bad accents and the Reeves' actual hat borrowed without permission. The girl with the braids watches. She claps. You bow dramatically. She throws a bit of bread at your head. It's a compliment. As the fire crackles, someone starts singing a tax song, an old tune with nonsense rhymes and a chorus that mostly involves shouting, "Not my goat," you sing along. Everyone does. Because taxes may take your grain, your eggs, your dignity, but they can't take your sense of humor. The next morning, life returns to normal. You feed the chickens, you sweep the cottage, you pretend the missing pot wasn't your fault. And you carve a little wooden sign for the goat pen. It says, "Not for tax." The rain begins in September and forgets how to stop. At first, it's a drizzle, soft, harmless, the kind that makes your hair damp and your feet squeaky. Then it grows persistent, then aggressive, then legendary. Within a week, your cottage smells like a wet dog married a turnip. By the end of the month, everything is damp: blankets, firewood, bread, even your thoughts. It's the year the rains never stopped. Your boots squelch, your bed straw molds. You've forgotten what it feels like to be dry. Your sister tries hanging clothes near the hearth, but the steam makes everything smell like boiled laundry. You sigh and pretend it's fashion. The roof leaks in 3 places. You place buckets underneath and name them: dribble, droplet, and the big one. The big one fills fastest. You race it against your cousin's leak bucket. It's the only entertainment left. Work doesn't stop. It just becomes muddier. Fields turn into soup. Paths vanish under puddles. You try helping your father check the barley only to lose a boot, then a sock, then your balance. You emerge looking like a rejected scarecrow. Your mother hoses you down with a ladle. The animals are miserable. The goats smell like regrets. The pigs squeal at every thunderclap. The chickens refuse to leave the coop and take turns glaring at you through the slats. One even pecks your finger when you reach for eggs. You consider writing them a strongly worded letter. One upside: the frogs thrive. They croak joyfully from every puddle, ditch, and overturned bucket. You and your friends name them, race them, and attempt to train one to hop on command. It doesn't work. You name him Sir Moist and declare him mayor of the mud patch. Another small mercy: mushrooms. They spring up everywhere, fat, colorful, some edible, some mysterious, all curious. Your grandmother teaches you which ones to pick. You bring home a basket full, only to discover your cousin already tried them. He's now speaking fluent duck. You decide to wait on the blue-spotted ones. Rain changes everything. Washing clothes becomes performance art. Drying clothes becomes a rumor. Baking bread turns into a heroic act involving 20 damp logs and prayers to the patron saint of fire. You invent one. Your hearth, once a comfort, now hisses in protest. Reginald the hearth dragon is grumpy. You whisper apologies into the embers and feed him extra pine cones. He grudgingly glows. The girl with the braids visits during a thunderstorm. She's soaked through, shivering but smiling. She hands you a carrot carved like a duck. For the mayor, she says. Sir Moist receives it with dignity. You both laugh until your stomachs hurt. You start making up stories to pass the time. One about a cloud that fell in love with a farmer and rained only on his field. Another about a witch who cursed a village to eternal drizzle until someone danced in the mud with honest joy. You try, you slip. The witch remains unimpressed. You carve toys boats mostly, and float them in the puddles. You build a dam from sticks and rocks. It collapses, of course. Everything collapses, but it's yours. Food grows scarce. Potatoes rot in the ground. Carrots turn slimy. The barley molds. You eat a lot of soup, thin, bland, often suspicious. Once your sister finds a beetle floating in hers. She names it lunch. You applaud her stoicism. People grow cranky. Arguments spark faster. One man yells at a cow. The cow wins. Your uncle blames the weather for everything, including his lost boot, his bad back, and the fact that the cat hates him. The priest declares a day of cleansing. Everyone gathers in the rain to chant psalms while waving herbs. The fire refuses to light. The herbs wilt. You pretend it helped anyway. But amidst the wet and weariness, there are small joys. Warm cider, dry socks briefly, the smell of rosemary on a hot stone, a hug from your sister, a joke from your grandmother that involves a goose, a bar of soap, and a very confused night. One evening, the girl with the braids returns. You sit by the hearth, sharing a crust of bread and watching the rain. She rests her head on your shoulder. You don't speak. You just listen to the drumming on the roof, the hiss of the fire, the sleepy grumble of the dog. Eventually, even the rain grows tired. By late winter, it fades to drizzle, then mist, then nothing. The earth sighs. The sun peeks through like it forgot its place. You step outside and feel warmth on your face for the first time in months. Everything is soggy. Everything is broken. But you're still standing. You've endured the flood, the fog, the frogs, and the funk. And now, you're ready to dry out and begin again. It starts with a stranger and a sentence that doesn't quite land right. He arrives on foot, hooded, cloaked, walking with the stiff caution of someone not used to mud. He carries a staff, a satchel of books, and a scroll case carved with odd symbols. The village children, you included, gather near the well to watch him arrive. Strangers are rare, strangers who quote Latin even rarer. The priest meets him first. They speak in hushed tones. You hear words like pilgrim, scribe, and translator, but something is off. When the man blesses the well, he pronounces the final word wrong. Even you, a semi-literate cabbage enthusiast, can tell. He says dominum instead of domini, or maybe it's the other way around. Either way, your priest winces like he's tasted spoiled cream. The stranger claims he's traveling between abbeys, gathering wisdom. He asks odd questions. How often does your village fast? Which saints do you pray to? Has anyone had visions? The reeve, who has the religious enthusiasm of a turnip, shrugs and says, "We have nettle soup Thursdays." The stranger doesn't laugh. Then he begins quoting scripture. Badly. It's not the errors themselves, it's the way he says them. Like he's trying too hard. Like he's read the Bible sideways. The priest asks where he studied. The man deflects, says the Holy Spirit is his teacher. Your grandmother mutters, "I and the devil," writes his homework. The whispers begin. First from the old women, then the midwife, then Mags, who stops selling him ale. Bad fermentation in that one, she says, smells like vinegar and pride. Still, the stranger stays, sleeping in the loft above the alehouse, copying texts by candlelight, eating alone. He tries to teach the children a hymn. You pretend to learn. You mostly use the tune to mock your cousin. One evening, the man gives a sermon in the square. He speaks of fire and purification. He says the world must be cleansed of false shepherds. He calls your priest a tired reed. Your priest clenches his jaw. Your uncle mutters, should have dunked him at the well. That night, the man's scrolls are found burned. No one confesses, no one apologizes. The next morning he's gone. The village exhales. But something lingers. You sit with your grandmother. She stirs soup and says, heresy doesn't always come with horns. Sometimes it just misquotes your saints. You don't fully understand, but you remember the look in the priest's eyes, equal parts fear and fury. And you remember the hush that fell after the stranger's sermon, like the very air had stopped breathing. Over the next few days, things return to normal, almost. The priest speaks more carefully now, chooses his words with precision. Mags hangs more rosemary above her door. Your mother says a second prayer before bed, just in case. You and your friends make jokes, of course. You pretend to exorcise each other with broom handles. You shout fake Latin spells like Chiconeus Maximus and chase the geese. One goose bites back, divine punishment perhaps. But beneath the jokes is a murmur of unease. You ask your grandmother what happens to heretics. She doesn't answer right away. Then she says, if they're lucky, they just walk out the way they came. And if they're not, she stirs the pot and changes the subject. You start listening more closely in church. You watch the priest's face. You watch who nods, who frowns, who looks away. Historians might argue whether the stranger planted real danger or just reminded everyone how fragile faith can feel when tested. That winter, someone carves a strange symbol into the side of the church, two intersecting circles, like a broken wheel. No one claims it. The priest scratches it off with a knife. No one speaks of it again. But you remember. You remember the man's voice, his strange smile, his way of twisting words just slightly, enough to turn reverence into suspicion. And you realize something. Belief is like fire, useful, comforting, but if handled carelessly, it burns, it consumes. So you go back to your chores. You tend the goats. You mend the fence. You sing the barley song to Reginald, hoping the hearth stays warm. And you keep your ears open. Not for sermons, but for mistakes. Your spouse dies in the middle of a calm morning. There's no dramatic storm, no prophecy, no haunting owl perched in the rafters, just a cough that wouldn't quit, a fever that wouldn't break, and finally, stillness. You're not old, not really, but you're old enough to have seen things, lost things, learned how silence can fill a room more fully than sound. They pass quietly, wrapped in linen, their hand in yours. You're not sure if they hear your final words. You say them anyway. The funeral is simple. There's no coffin, no headstone, just a linen shroud, a woven cross of twigs, and the entire village gathered in awkward clusters. The priest mumbles the rites. Your cousin sings something tuneless but earnest. Someone sneezes into their sleeve. A goat wanders too close to the grave. You stand beside the fresh earth, holding yourself still. Later, people offer bread, stew, and advice. Mags gives you a jug of her strongest ale and a loaf that could stun a boar. For the grief, she says, and the plumbing. Your grandmother just nods and mutters. Love is a fire that always leaves ash. Then life resumes. Because it has to. But you feel the absence, in the quiet moments, in the missing laugh beside the hearth, in the fact that you now take up more space in the bed than you want to. You cry once, just once, while stirring the stew and realizing no one's going to complain about it being too salty. You cry into the spoon, then finish cooking, because grief doesn't stop the hunger, it just seasons it. You start spending more time with your loom. It's been sitting in the corner like a neglected beast, tall, stubborn, covered in cobwebs. You clear it, oil it, sit down and begin to weave. Your grandmother taught you once. Her voice echoes in your memory. Over, under, pull tight but not too tight, like life. The rhythm comforts you. Thread by thread, row by row, you build something, not just fabric but proof, that you can still create, still mend, still move forward, even if it's at the pace of a snail dragging a cart uphill. Neighbors notice. Someone asks if you'll weave them a new belt. Someone else brings you wool to dye. You trade for onions, for mittens, for a half-tame cat who adopts your hearth and promptly ignores you. One day, the girl with the braids, now a woman with stronger arms and a sharper laugh, brings you herbs. She sits beside the fire, stirring nettle tea while you weave. Neither of you speak for a while. Then she says, "It's quieter without him." You nod. She doesn't say, "I'm sorry." She says, "I remember the way he laughed when the pig chased him into the mill pond." You laugh, a real one, a sharp bark that startles the cat. It feels like the first true laugh in months. Over time, you become the weaver, not just someone who knows how, but someone people trust to fix things. Torn sleeves, frayed shawls, old memories knotted into thread. Children visit. You teach them how to make cord from nettles. You show them how to braid grass. You tell them stories not just about loss, but about turnip festivals, goat misadventures, and love that once smelled like wood smoke and porridge. You're still lonely. You always will be, in a way. That's the price of love that lasted. But you're not alone. The village wraps around you like a patchwork cloak, sometimes scratchy, often mismatched, but warm in all the right places. You begin keeping a journal, just marks really, for days when the sun shines, when the bread rises, when the fire doesn't hiss, for days when someone laughs, when someone remembers. And for days when you remember to breathe deeply and say, "Still here, still warm, still weaving." Because loss is never really the end, just a change in pattern. And you're still on the loom. Children are like turnips. They grow crooked, stubborn, and in directions you didn't plan. Your grandchildren, or maybe great-nieces and nephews, it's complicated, no one keeps perfect records, are sprouting fast. You remember when they fit on your hip. Now they're taller than your roof beams and talk back with a confidence that would terrify saints. You sit near the hearth, weaving and watching. One wears his cowl backward. He says it's for style. You say nothing, but you shake your head slowly enough for it to sting. Another refuses to stir the stew widdershins the proper direction, as everyone knows. When the pot boils over, he shrugs and says, "Widdershins is a myth." You wonder where they get these ideas. Then you remember, they get them from you. You were the odd one once. You sang to carrots. You named frogs. You carved faces into turnips and insisted they had opinions. Your grandmother tolerated you. Now it's your turn. You try to teach them the old ways. You gather them around the hearth and show them how to braid nettle into cord. They groan. You try to demonstrate how to patch a tunic. They ask if it can be done with flair. One suggests using bird feathers. You don't answer. You just hand them a needle and nod. Mealtimes are chaos. One won't eat anything green. One eats only things that are green. One asks if soup can be less soupy. You threaten to feed them moss. They laugh, then they eat. They steal your tools. They move your firewood. They forget to shut the door. You grumble, loudly. Then you smile when they're not looking. One day, you catch them dancing around the goat pen, singing a song that is either a blessing or a prank. You lean against the wall and watch, remembering your own feet doing the same awkward steps long ago. You try to tell them stories. Some listen. Some roll their eyes. One interrupts every few words to ask if there were dragons. You lie and say yes. They demand details. You invent a dragon named Bluster who once stole your shoe and only ate radishes. They are enthralled. You immediately regret setting the bar that high. You teach them words they've never heard: widdershins, mizzle, croft, scraggle. They teach you words you can't spell and aren't sure are real. One calls you a legend. You ask if that's good. He nods. You nod back, pretending you knew that already. They're messy, loud, irreverent. They challenge the reeve. They question the priest. One starts drawing stars on her boots. Another insists on keeping a beetle as a pet. You find it in the soup pot. You say nothing. The beetle lives. You begin to enjoy their nonsense. They make you laugh when you're supposed to scold. They ask questions that don't have answers. They remind you what it felt like to believe every stick was a sword and every puddle was a portal. They drag you outside. You haven't danced in years, but they demand it. So you do, a wobbly spin, a sideways stomp, laughter peeling from your throat like a song you'd forgotten. Your knees creak, your hips protest, but the children cheer like you've summoned the moon itself. Later, they gather around as you mend a basket. One asks if the world is ending. You blink. Why? Because the barley's late and the sky looked weird. You look out the window. The barley is late, the sky is weird, but you remember every year has its storm, every harvest has its worry, and still people dance, still goats cause trouble, still soup finds the bowl. You ruffle his hair and say, if the world ends, we'll just weave a new one. He believes you. And for a moment, so do you. Because these wild, crooked, brilliant children, they're proof that something continues, that your songs, your stories, your stubborn turnip-laced wisdom, they stuck, they wove themselves into the next row of life. They're not you. They're better. More daring, more imaginative, less afraid to stir the soup the wrong way and see what happens. You sit back in your chair. You pull a shawl around your shoulders. The fire crackles. The children run outside, chasing chickens, dreams, and probably disaster. You smile. They'll be fine. Probably. It begins with a knock on the door, just after dusk. Not a polite knock. Not a neighbor's knock. A traveler's knock, hesitant, low, followed by the soft swish of a wet cloak and a cough that sounds rehearsed. You rise from your chair, joints creaking like tired floorboards, and open the door with your weaving knife tucked discreetly in your sleeve. There he stands, the pilgrim. He's soaked, his shoes more mud than leather, and his eyes scanning the inside of your cottage like he's seeing something from far away. He says he's on his way to the coast, or maybe from the coast. The story shifts. You don't ask too many questions. You've learned the best travelers carry truth in bits, not bundles. You offer him stew. He offers a smile. It's a tired smile. A man who's seen things smile. The firelight catches the silver at his temples and the stain of ink on his fingers. You notice a rosary at his belt, a feather charm hanging from it, a curious mix of devotion and folklore. He eats slowly, gratefully, says little. Then, when the bowl is scraped clean and the children have been ushered off to torment the goat elsewhere, he speaks. He tells stories. Not the ones from church, not even the ones from market fairs. These are old, strange tales woven from memory and rumor, soaked in dreams. He speaks of a city built entirely underground, where candles float and time sleeps. He speaks of a nun who heard the stars sing and mapped them in lentils. He speaks of a king who outlawed silence because his dreams had started talking back. You're not sure what's real and what's invention. You don't care. The children creep back in, wide-eyed, blanket-wrapped, eyes like lanterns. You let them stay. The pilgrim doesn't stop. He smiles now, a quiet storytelling smile. He says he once met a fish that knew scripture. He says he once followed a map that led to a dried-up well filled with feathers and light. You ask him where he's from. He just taps his walking staff and says, "Nowhere near enough." Later, you offer him the straw bed by the hearth. He thanks you and sleeps like a man whose thoughts never rest even when his body does. You dream vividly that night. You see a road of bones that sings when walked upon. You see a cat wearing spectacles, reading your future in the soot. You wake confused, hungry, curious. The pilgrim is already up, packing quietly, sipping the dregs of the morning broth. He thanks you with a bow and a small gift, a stone, smooth and dark, warm to the touch. It remembers stories, he says. Just hold it close when the world feels thin. He walks off into the fog. The children watch from the doorway, silent. That day nothing happens, but everything feels changed. The stew tastes different. The wind sounds more thoughtful. The geese are unusually cooperative. You keep the stone in your apron pocket. You find yourself whispering to it when no one's around. Over the following weeks, you notice strange things. One child swears she saw a crow with 3 eyes. Another claims to dream in other people's memories. Your cousin starts writing riddles in the dirt with his toe. The village midwife begins humming the pilgrim's tune while grinding herbs. You don't talk about it, but everyone remembers. Because that night, the one with the fire, the rain, the stories, it moved something. Not much, just a thread in the tapestry, but enough. And when the children gather around your hearth now, you find yourself echoing the stranger's voice. You tell the story of the fish and the scripture, of the king and his dreaming law, of a stone that remembers. They listen. And maybe, one day, one of them will knock on a door in another village, soaked and smiling, with a feather charm on their belt, and stories wrapped in mist. Because that's how stories travel. Quietly. On tired feet. And through hearts that never quite stop believing. You know it's winter when your teeth ache before you even open your mouth. There's frost inside the cottage. Inside, the fire doesn't warm so much as negotiate with the cold. Reginald the hearth dragon is down to a whisper, curled around a few surviving coals like a cat with poor circulation. You wear 3 tunics, 2 shawls, and a wool cap with a hole in it, which you pretend is for ventilation. The children are quieter now, too cold to bicker, too smart to move. You've never seen them sit so still unless they're scheming or asleep. Occasionally, one farts audibly. It's the only entertainment left. This is the toothless winter. Because now you are missing teeth. Not all of them, just a few. Enough to change how soup tastes and how your cousins laugh. You insist you can still chew anything. The turnip you attempted last week would disagree. But you adjust. You cut things smaller. You favor porridge. You develop a deep and abiding friendship with stewed apples. You also grow suspicious. Because strange things are happening in the village. It starts with the singing. Soft at first, a hum at twilight, then a low chant, but it's not coming from a person. It's coming from the cowshed. At first, you assume someone's drunk, or very devoted to bovine hymns. But no, when you investigate, the singing stops. You find the cows asleep. One stares at you a little too knowingly. You back away slowly. Next, footprints in the snow. But not people's. Not quite. 5 toes but too long, like someone halfway between person and bird walked through your yard at midnight. Your dog won't go near them. Your neighbor blames foxes. You consider blaming the singing cow. Then, the shadow in the smoke. One night you're tending the hearth, muttering to Reginald when the smoke shifts. Not just curling, moving, like it's watching. You freeze. It pauses, then disappears. You tell no one, but you hang garlic above the mantel and whisper apologies to the old gods, just in case. The village starts to murmur. Someone says they saw a figure by the graveyard, bent backward, arms too long. Someone else says their onions sprouted in the cellar in winter. Mag says her ale curdled at midnight and hasn't stopped fizzing since. She calls it the spirited batch. No one drinks it. Your grandmother says it's just winter making everyone mad. But she starts sleeping with a hot brick and her old dagger under the pillow. You do the same. You try not to be afraid. After all, you've survived bad crops, plague rumors, the year the bees rebelled. What's a little weirdness? Still, you watch. You notice which chickens won't roost, which goats stare too long, which corners feel colder than they should. You keep the fire burning, even if it means feeding it your last stick of birch. You draw chalk symbols near the door. You press your stone, the one the pilgrim gave you, to your chest before bed. And through it all, you wait. Then one morning, it's gone. The chill is still there, the toothlessness, the aching knees, but the weirdness has passed. No more singing cows, no footprints. The smoke drifts like normal again. Reginald purrs. You let yourself breathe. You find a small sprig of green near the threshold, a snowdrop, delicate and bright. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because you're alive, and this strange little flower dared to bloom anyway. Later, the children ask if you believe in ghosts. You smile, a little gap-toothed now, and say, "I believe in winter, and that's enough." They ask if you were scared. You think about it, then nod. "Yes, but I was also warm, and watched, and I made it to stew." They nod like they understand. Maybe they do. Because winter is a kind of ghost, too. It visits, it changes the shape of things, it makes you question what's real and what's just wind. But it always leaves. And when it does, you sweep the hearth, refill the woodpile, and whisper to the fire, "Next time bring less drama." You know it's time when the fire feels too far away, even when it's close. You sit by the hearth, wrapped in wool, sipping broth so thin it's mostly warmth. The children have gone to bed. The dog snores in the corner. Reginald glows faintly, barely more than a coal now. You feel the stillness settle over your bones, gentle and slow. You're tired, not just from the day, but from the living. Not sad, not sick, just full, like a story that's reached its last line and is content to be told. You sense it coming, not like a warning, but like a visitor, an old friend who never knocks but always waits patiently by the door. So you prepare. You take a final walk. It's a short one, just down the path to the old oak where your spouse carved your names when you were barely old enough to know how letters worked. The bark is thicker now, your initials crooked, but they're still there. You touch the carving. You smile. Back at the cottage, you sit with the girl who once had braids and now has laugh lines and calloused hands. She holds your fingers, doesn't say much, doesn't have to. You've had a whole life of talking. Now is the time for knowing. Later, you lie beside the hearth. The children gather quietly, as if called by instinct. One curls by your feet. Another hums the barley song off-key but tender. You tell them one last story. About a frog named Sir Moist, a girl who threw crabapples, and a goat who believed in ghosts. They laugh, then they sniffle, then they fall asleep beside you, warm and soft and exactly where they should be. You feel the fire flicker, just once. And you let go. They bury ye the next morning. Not with ceremony, but with care, wrapped in your best tunic, a ribbon at your wrist, your lucky crabapple carving tucked beside your heart. The grave is dug near the hedge, under the hawthorn tree where the children used to dare each other to kiss its bark. There is no priest, he's away in the next village, so Mag says a few words, your granddaughter sings a tune, your sister places a spoon on your chest. The dog howls once, then lies down and refuses to move. The earth receives you kindly. That night, the children light a candle. The fire burns a little brighter. Reginald purrs again. The stew simmers. Life continues. But your name lingers on the lips of the children, in the curve of a wooden spoon, in the crooked cabbage rows, in the songs sung widdershins. You are missed. You are remembered. You are home. The seasons keep turning, soft and inevitable. The barley grows again. The hens cluck without a care. The goats escape twice in 1 week and no one even yells. Life, as it always has, stumbles forward, muddied boots and sunburnt cheeks and all. Your cottage is quieter now. Your chair by the hearth remains empty, but not untouched. Someone lays fresh herbs on the seat once a week. The children squabble over who gets to sit there to think deep thoughts. The girl with the laugh lines now watches the fire the way you used to, tilted slightly forward, like it might whisper something only she can hear. Your stories echo. The children reenact your goat tales with wild flair. One insists Sir Moist the frog was real. Another claims your carved turnip faces still blink at dusk. You suspect you've become part folklore, part memory, part guardian spirit of half-finished soup. Mags claims to smell you when her ale ferments just right, cider and nettle and a hint of smug. No one corrects her. The earth you return to softens in spring. Wildflowers bloom across your grave, daisies, dandelions, and a single bold onion. The children leave offerings, buttons, feathers, tiny carved spoons. One leaves a frog, possibly symbolic, possibly accidental. Time stretches now. The children grow. One learns to weave just like you. Another learns to lie convincingly just like you. They speak of you often, not in hushed tones but with laughter, with mischief, with fondness stitched into the edges. You have become the voice in their stories. The warmth in the fire. The whisper in the turnip rows. They speak your name when the stew tastes good, when the cabbage grows straight, when they dance badly around the maypole and blame your ghost for their clumsy feet. You are not lost. You are layered, woven into straw, memory, and song. They carry you. Always. So now, here we are, near the end of this long, earthy life. The fields are quiet. The tools are resting. The sky above the village dims to soft gray, streaked with the last ribbons of dusk. You, dear listener, are curled beneath your blanket, or maybe your thoughts, and the world outside begins to fade. Picture the cottage again, your cottage. The fire still glows slow and steady, casting gentle shadows on the beams. You can smell the stew faint now, just the ghost of onions and thyme. Somewhere, a dog turns once in its sleep, sighs, and settles. The air is still, like the hush before dawn, and outside, the earth is waiting, never demanding, only welcoming. You've lived fully. You've felt the mud between your toes, the ache in your shoulders, the joy of barley sprouting and children giggling and soup warming cold fingers. You've worked, you've laughed, you've carved faces into turnips and kissed someone near the cabbage rows. You've told stories by firelight that outlast the telling. So breathe in, slowly now, and let go of the day. Let the fields slip away, the fences, the bells, the never-quite-dry laundry. You've earned your rest. The hearth is still glowing, and your story is gently, gently closing. Good night.